I'd like to welcome you all to the Hunter Living Histories Showcase for the 3rd of April 2023. I'll begin with an acknowledgement of country. I'd like to acknowledge the Awabakal people on the land that we're currently meeting with at the University of Newcastle. And I pay my respects to their elders, both past, present, and those emerging. And I also pay my respects to also the lands that you are beaming in to us today through Zoom. And pay my respects to your elders as well, and also to any Indigenous peoples that are joining us on this showcase this afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. And just on a matter of Zoom etiquette and housekeeping, I'll hand over to Anne.
Yeah, just a reminder for people to keep themselves on mute while there's presenters. And we're recording the session. If anyone doesn't want to be recorded, we can edit you out at the recording. So just let me know after the meeting.
Thank you, Anne. Okay, our first presenter today is Mr. Ryan Stewart, who's a history teacher and PhD candidate. And he'll be speaking on Queen Margaret and the Awabakal Nation. So we've interacted with Ryan for over a number of years now, supplying you with remote resources through COVID and everything. So we look forward to your talk today. Anyway, last Monday, I think it was, Robert Watson heard Ryan on local radio ABC talking about Margaret and wondered whether he would be a great presenter. So we knew Ryan, so we thought we'd reach out, and he said yes. So over to you, Ryan.
Well, thanks, Johnny. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep,
fantastic. Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm thrilled that that some of you heard the interview recently. And Margaret is a big part of my research because she was lasted by settler colonists, which, as you all know, was a common practice by settler colonists across the continent. And you know, Margaret obviously led a very interesting life and dealt with all facets of colonisation from her birth right through until the late 19th century. So a fascinating figure. And before I start, I'd just like to acknowledge the Darramaragal family group, whose country I'm on at the moment. On the North Shore, and I'd like to acknowledge the Darkinjung people on whose country I live, and obviously the Awabakal Nation, which Margaret was an integral part of. So where to begin? I'll just start my my PowerPoint. Just bear with me while I share the screen. And just thank you, Johnny, over the years for supplying me with a lot of these resources, and some of the resources I'm using today, definitely from you and your wonderful team there. And thank you so much, Anne, for organising this session as well today and having me aboard. So let's get started. Just bear with me while I find my PowerPoint screen. Okay. All right, we should be good to go. Okay, can everybody see that okay? Yep. Okay, so there's just some of my details there, folks. I'm a history teacher at Pymble Ladies College and a PhD candidate at the University of Newcastle. I'm with Nancy Cushing and Vicky Haskins. I was with Linda Ryan, but she had to step down. And there are my, that's my uni email and my Twitter handle and LinkedIn. Now, the image there is of a local history written on the Central Coast by a guy named Frederick Bennett in the 1960s. He was not from the Central Coast, but he retired there and was interested in local history, and he wrote this history of the Aboriginal people of the Central Coast, and that encompassed the Awabakal people of Lake Macquarie. It is in the cultural collections there. Johnny probably knows the title, having looking at it in front of him. But the reason that's on the screen, folks, is because in this text, Bennett sort of permeated the myth that Margaret of the Awabakal was the so-called last of the Awabakal people, and so this is one of the key texts in which she was lasted, and I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. So just a notice that First Nations people should be aware this paper contains words and descriptions written by non-Indigenous people in the past, and they may be confronting and are considered inappropriate and offensive. It also contains the names, descriptions and images of deceased. So my research area is obviously the Central Coast, but as you all know, the Central Coast is quite fluid on the northern area with Lake Macquarie and Newcastle. And Margaret and her peoples and her neighbours, obviously, this is their country. And you can see just on the map there, that's a map that I've designed myself, and we can see the Darkinung and Awabakal country there. And we can see the 1840 police district boundaries for what we now know as the Central Coast. And we can see Wyong, where Margaret was born, and Swansea, where she resided, really important part of her country up there at Swansea, and obviously still carries her name today in Margaret's Bay, which I'll talk about a bit later on. So Margaret was lasted by settler colonists, and a lot of research has been done into lasting, particularly in North America, and a little bit's being done here on this continent, and I'm doing research into lasting as well. In predominantly British settler societies in Australia, Canada, New Zealand and the United States, settler colonists were willing to, perhaps even at pains to, designate certain Indigenous men and women as the so-called last of their people. And in Australia, this phenomenon lasted well into the 20th century. Last of what? Well, they were seen in the British colonial mindset to have been the last king, queen or monarch sometimes, the last of the so-called full-bloods, using colonial language of the time, to be the last oldest full-blooded Aboriginal person, as seen in this article in Scone, and also lasted sometimes because they were the last to be seen living in a traditional manner, as in not adopting European clothing, customs or rituals. But that begs the question, part and parcel of lasting was obvious. It was quite often the designation of people as a king or queen, and Margaret certainly got the title queen, and her husband Ned got the title king. But they were king and queen of what? Well, they could have been seen to be the leader of a family group. That's often the case. Sometimes they're seen to be the leader of a broader language group. This is from the settler colonist perspective. As Paul Barrett noted, the British, unable to cope with such a pure democracy in First Nations decision-making, unilaterally appointed their own kings. So you might recall Bungaree being appointed the chief of the Broken Bay people by Macquarie. Sometimes they're nominated as king or queen of the people, as he or she was deemed to be the last of their tribe, which may have been the case with Margaret. Or you've got the satirical and really demeaning designation as king or queen, as they were seen as the king and queen of nobody. It's purely satire. As G.E. Ford noted, he did research on the Darkinung people. Some settlers designated lone domesticated Aboriginal men at their farm as king, i.e. the king of nobody. For example, King Neddy was seen to have been the last full-blooded member of the Wiradjuri tribe, and he was described as being a king without, as a monarch without a single subject or kingdom. So that derision and that satire. Margaret obviously was well respected by settler colonists, and she was an amazing survivor during that chaotic period of colonisation. And the reason she was designated queen was probably more attached to her being seen as the so-called last. They never really were the last. Settler colonial local histories, however, did continue the myth of Margaret being the last. And on the Central Coast, the person lasted up there was Billy Faulkner, and they were living at the same time. Margaret outlived Billy Faulkner. We do have an image of Margaret, which does appear in a reprint of Reverend Threlkeld's Reverend Threlkeld's work on the Awabakal people. And in the 1892 reprint, this image appears. It does note that she was born at Wyong, different spelling to the current suburb, near the Hawkesbury, which is geographically quite distant. And it says she was about 65 years of age, living in her slab hut on a piece of land near Macquarie Heads, and they're referring to Swansea. And that also appears in Bennett's 1969 history of the Aboriginal people of the Central Coast. Unfortunately, this image is obviously quite a hard image to digest in terms of the way she was photographed from that sort of anthropological perspective at the time. And, you know, for us today and for First Nations peoples, it conjures a really dreadful experience during colonisation and you know, efforts in the 1890s to sort of photograph these people that they deemed to be the so-called last. So it is a melancholy photograph. However, she was a great survivor, as I said before, and I'll be taking you through some evidence around the ways in which she survived the experience and found ways to coexist with the settler colonists. So if we trace the fragmentary evidence we have from the settler colonists, obviously I have talked to Margaret's descendants, and we're lucky enough to have Bronwyn Chambers in residence at Arimbi University campus, and she's a descendant of Margaret. And I've also done a lot of work with Gabby Duncan, who has a Wabakal heritage also. But Margaret, the settler colonist sources tell us that she was born at Wyong. We all know where Wyong is, and we can see, by looking at this map, we can see her country topographically. Born at Wyong and ended up living up at Swansea. So we can see that sort of northern end of the Central Coast up into the Newcastle region and Lake Macquarie. A lot of this evidence for Margaret from the settler colonial perspective is housed in the wonderful cultural collections there at Auckland, and it is part of the Haslam collections. And he actually did a paper back in '84, Margaret, a Queen of Ancient Tradition, and I have accessed that document there. And Johnny, thank you so much for helping me do that a few years ago. So that is there in the cultural collections now, but I'm pulling from other evidence also. So born at Wyong and ended up at the Belmont mission with Reverend Threlkeld. And we're told she was moved up there quite young. And spending time with Reverend Threlkeld there, she was obviously instructed in English and also in religious teachings. And this is where we get some really interesting evidence about Margaret, because from settler colonists who were interviewed by Haslam, elderly settler colonists that were interviewed by Haslam, they could remember Margaret. And he talked to people that could remember her. And he talked to a lady in her 90s who could remember Margaret. And she said that when she was young, she spoke a Wabakal and Margaret spoke English. And she remembers that Margaret taught them the Lord's Prayer. And so her instruction from Reverend Threlkeld at Belmont on his mission there enabled her to learn English and obviously learn religious instruction and the Second Testament, which, as we know, Threlkeld translated into a Wabakal, an amazing undertaking from him. But what's really interesting is some anecdotes that survived from Threlkeld's interactions with her and what Margaret thought about Christianity. So after their experiences together, Margaret, according to the settler colonial records, did become a Christian of sorts, and she did baptise her children. And as I said in the radio interview for those listening, her perception of Christianity tied in with her own cultural beliefs and law, L-O-R-E, and understanding of dreaming and her understanding of spirituality, because according to Haslam's research and the settler colonial oral sources, Margaret actually said, there's a big spirit in the sky, it's all the same man. Quote, like you Christians, you have different ways, sayings and doing things, but you all believe in one big spirit fella. End quote. So according to this oral evidence, admittedly from settler colonists, but Margaret had a way of merging her understanding of the Creator with what Threlkeld was teaching her about the Christian Creator. And it's a really interesting anecdote that has survived. She called the creator, as Awabakal people do, Cohen. And there's a bit of a debate about that because Bayami is traditionally the name of the creator in the regions that we live in. And one theory is that they wouldn't say the name Bayami, the creator. So there was a different name for the spirit without actually saying the name of the creator. And when I show you some photographs later on from where Margaret lived at the end of her life, on a really sunny day and a nice day, you can see Mount Yango very clearly, where the creator stepped out of the Milky Way and created all living things according to law and dreaming. So she had an interesting experience with Threlkeld and learning about Christianity. From there, there's a bit of a gap in the sources, but a gentleman named Reverend Alfred Glennie, who was from Kincumber on the Central Coast, he actually baptised her and her husband, Ned, also called King Ned, baptised their child. And it appears that they were baptised around Jiwoy on the Central Coast. So again, we can see that fluidity between the Lake Macquarie region and the Central Coast. And Glennie in his journals for 1860 does say that he spent time with Margaret and Ned and that he did baptise, quote, a little Aboriginal infant, quote, a fine little boy of about 7 months old. And Reverend Glennie says, quote, some 2 or 3 blacks attended to witness the ceremony and they seemed very much interested in it. There is an idea that one of the other Awabakal people there may have been Margaret's sister, Nee, and I. And again, Haslam provides some anecdotes about Nee and I. And Nee sounds like a very interesting person. And she lived also at Swansea Heads, and we're told that she lived in a hut there at Swansea Heads, also not too far from her sister. It appears Nee did pass away before Margaret. Now, Nee was interviewed, and an anecdote has survived. Apparently, Nee said to the person who was asking her some questions that she preferred. The person asked her about the government ration blankets, and apparently, Nee said she would rather, quote, a possum cloak made by her man than the government issued blankets. So, understandably, the possum cloak much better quality than those government issued blankets, and Nee would much prefer the wonderful cloaks made by themselves rather than these government issued items. So a nice anecdote appearing there from Margaret's sister Nee. We don't know when that anecdote comes from. I'm thinking probably the 1860s. As we get through the 1860s, we're starting to see a big decline in numbers, or at least what the settler colonists are recording, both of the peoples on the Central Coast and around Swansea and the southern end of Lake Macquarie. And I will jump into some Wyong-oriented source material because Edward Stinson, who was a teacher, he was actually a principal eventually in Wyong in the 70s and 80s, he did a lot of local histories of the area, and he reproduced the memoirs of William Bernard Woodbury, who was born in 1869, and he could remember Billy Faulkner, who was last on the Central Coast, and he could remember Margaret. And he said that by the late 1860s and early 1870s, quote, there were also blacks at Black Margaret Swamp, he called it, Black Margaret Swamp, which is now called Margaret's Bay at Swansea. And the government blanket issuing for 1876 does count 13 people, and we're thinking that those 13 people were at Margaret's Bay in Swansea. They weren't actually on the Central Coast. They were at southern Lake Macquarie peoples, Margaret's peoples around there. So we are seeing, according to the settler colonial records, we are seeing the numbers unfortunately dwindling during this period. And this was around the time when Margaret was lasted as the so-called last of the Awabakal. Around this time too, Margaret had 2 children, as I discussed before, Ellen and Henry, William Henry, who was better known as Buchan. They both went to school around Swansea, we are told. We're also told that Buchan was an outstanding sports person. Unfortunately, Buchan did die young, and Ellen did outlive Margaret, and she had many children. She was a mother of 7, Ellen, and she died in 1902. Margaret passed away in 1894, and it's through Ellen and her children that we have many Awabakal people coming back to Margaret and her family. When Margaret was living in Swansea, now called Margaret's Bay, she found a way to work within and alongside the colonists on her land by making cabbage tree hats, which provided a good source of income for her, and she was fetching between £2 to £4 per hat, making this for settler colonists. As some of you may know, she survived 2 attempts by settler colonists to remove her from her area that she was residing in at Margaret's Bay. And indeed, Percy Haslam in 84 commented that we may actually be dealing with at least one of the first recorded land rights undertakings or sovereignty in the 1880s, late 70s, 1880s, when Margaret did survive attempts to force her from her land. And she was granted the land that she lived on in Margaret's Bay, and she had a little dwelling there. And we're told too that she always had fresh water for people coming past. So she was very hospitable to the settler colonists. She had fresh water in her dwelling. And she also had, apparently, you've got to be careful of these anecdotes, but she also had with her apparently a domesticated wallaby and a domesticated bird. And apparently the domesticated bird would talk, and apparently the wallaby would jump on her lap whenever it was scared. So we get these really interesting anecdotes come through. Obviously, they are from the settler colonist perspective, so we do need to treat them with a little bit of a grain of salt. And so Ned did pass away before Margaret, but we do have the place name there today, Ned's Bay, which I'll show you on the screen shortly. And Buchan died around the age of 18, her son, but her daughter did survive beyond her. Unfortunately, we are told that towards the end of Margaret's life, they were quite impoverished, surviving on government rationing through the Protection Board, the New South Wales Protector at that time. And she did pass away in 1894 due to lung and liver issues. Her daughter then died, we are told, tragically in 1902 from starvation. So we are seeing, colonisation and contact and, continued on well beyond the period people usually ascribe it to. And Ellen, her daughter, obviously faced really troubling times after her mother passed. And the Awabakal people proudly survived. And so the notion of Margaret as the last, obviously a complete falsehood. And what the settler colonists meant, obviously, was that she was the so-called last full blood, using that racist language from the time. So Black Ned's Bay is here, still called Black Ned's Bay. There's no public history there, unfortunately. There should be. Perhaps that's something we can all band together and try to do as a group. But that's Black Ned's Bay. There is remnants of middens there. These are all my own photographs. Unfortunately, no one's paid any attention to the remnants of the middens, and these big rocks have just been thrown over them. If we move across to the other side of the road, we can see Margaret's Bay. And I'll just show you a couple of images there. This is taken from the reserve just here, looking towards Margaret's Bay. So Margaret's Bay is literally around the left-hand corner there. And you can see I was there at a beautiful time in the afternoon. Absolutely stunning and beautiful country, wonderful country. No public history there to honour Margaret. And looking out across Lake Macquarie, on a clear day, you can see Mount Yango popping up, where the Creator stepped out of the sky and created all living things. So it's a magic spot, beautiful country there, and an amazing story of survival for Margaret and the Awabakal people. Unfortunately, caught up in the calamity that was colonisation, and Margaret caught up in the trope of the so-called last, but her people survived and lived on, and it's an amazing country there. And I do feel that there needs to be some public history there to honour these amazing people of the Awabakal Nation. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Any questions? Just put your hand up or just jump in. Amir? Oh, Amir.
Yeah. Amir, is it? Oh, well, I was going to say I haven't read Peirce's books, unfortunately, and I'd really love to, but I certainly was very much involved in saving that bay. Net Black Ned's Bay, that is. And I'm really very interested in the idea of making some monument there. The story should be told very well. Peirce, and I used to wander around the country with Peirce quite a bit, and Peirce was working on the Newcastle Sun, I think, in those days, and he always was going to make this story, and I said, you should be publishing Peirce. And he said, no, I'm going to get the two of these things, 2 books up ready, and I'll publish those. So we're waiting, and I think there was great tragedy because Peirce was a good writer and wrote well for the Herald, and he never actually told me. He did tell me that the Aboriginal people would be that we shouldn't show where bora grounds have been removed or destroyed. He said because the Aboriginal people will be very upset by that, and I didn't know that Peirce had that. He never let on that he was Aboriginal with descent, but he did. I was always amazed that he was so interested in what we were doing, trying to save areas. It's just I must get to having a look at Peirce's writings, and we did have Professor Fryer do some research and find the spot where Threlkell's house was, the Aboriginal. Anyway, I'm getting old, I'm afraid, but I'm just really so disappointed that I didn't know more about when we were doing that, all that work, especially for the National Trust in the 60s and 70s. That's all I was disappointed about. It's really wonderful to see that you've done this.
Yeah, we're so indebted to him, and I'd love to talk to you interpersonally, having known him, because we're so indebted to his research. And a gentleman just did his doctoral thesis 2 years ago on the Central Coast, First Nations history of the Central Coast, and he used Peirce's documents quite extensively too. So yeah, they're amazing. They're in our library, so they are there. And phenomenal research from him. We're so indebted to him.
Yeah, Ryan, I need to put you in contact with some other descendants of Margaret and Ned that we've known for a number of years too. I sent them an email today. So yeah, I think they'd be really interested in seeing your work. I think a few years ago we also tracked down Margaret's entry in the hospital records of the got to be careful using the Royal Newcastle Hospital, which is Newcastle Hospital then. But she's definitely there. Yeah, but it's great to see this research. Stephen?
I was interested if you have any clear idea about the origin of the photograph of Margaret.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and that's on the to-do list. No, that's very much on the to-do list. My assumption is I've got to do some more chasing up there, but my assumption is, because this was done in other areas too, this kind of photographing of the so-called last, and we do have quite a few photographs of this sort of anthropological style. So I am due to publish my thesis next year, submit and make it online, make it available online. So when that happens, hopefully I'll have the provenance of that photograph. But yeah, that's definitely on the to-do list. So thanks for the reminder.
Jude, you have a question?
Hi. I just wondered, do you know exactly where Margaret lived around the Margaret Bay, is my question. And I just want to let you know that I'm involved in, there's going to be an exhibition at Nobby's Lighthouse from August of 17 women that have stood out in the history of Newcastle and Hunter. And we've chosen Margaret as one of those women.
Oh,
so,
fantastic.
and there'll be artworks made for each of the women. So I'll let the artist know about the talk today once it's up, so she can watch that. And thank you very much for presenting that. I'm very interested in Margaret. She sounds like a fantastic woman.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jude. And yeah, potentially I'd like to come along. So
oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
so that'd be great.
We'll let you know through Johnny and Anne.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, in terms of her dwelling, so in the sort of at the mouth of the bay, if I can put it that way, and Laurie, what's his surname? Laurie Allen, who did the thesis on the Darkinung on the Central Coast, he has located a drawing of what may even be a depiction of her dwelling. And his thesis is available online. So just Google Laurie Allen, history of...
Sorry, I know Laurie, and I've got a copy of his thesis. I'll recheck that. Thank you.
Yes, yeah. So there is a photograph, there is a reproduction of that drawing in there. So thanks, Jude. Folks, I'm so sorry. I'm a full-time history teacher. I've got to go to a lesson, but I just want to thank you all so much for coming along, and big thanks to Anne and Johnny, and I'm thrilled to have been here today. So thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. A great session. Goodbye. I'll watch the recording later. Thank you.
We'll continue talking about photos. See you later, Ryan. Yeah, there's one more photo, Stephen, who asked, that I know of, and that was taken by Alexander Galloway. He was a curry photographer. We know him mostly through his music. He wrote a couple of songs called The Song for Newcastle and Sailing on Lake Macquarie, I think. So these were beautiful songs that were done for the war effort. But he also was a photographer, and he did take a photograph of Margaret. It's a glass negative. I don't know where the original is, but I have seen reproductions of it. So that's another sort of thing to do. The Edgeworth David Museum might know more. I don't know if any of their representatives are zooming in today. But anyway, we've got a few new people today who are joining us. Tully from Scone, is that right?
Singleton, hello.
Singleton, sorry. Scone and Singleton. Oh, God, I'm going to get it up now. Welcome.
Thank you.
And also Don Wilson is joining us today with
Chris Richmond.
So
Welcome, Don.
there's Don's book, which in our pre-record days before COVID, he came and took us through it, and it was really good. I thought that was a model on how to take people through books, is have the overhead projector and you just show us the book hand by hand, page by page. And so anyway, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. And Sonia Hornery, member for Walls End, is also joining us, I noticed. So welcome, Sonia, and thank you for your support.
Always, thank you.
And on that note, it's really good to know that Trove's been given a lifeline by the Albanese government. So thank you very much for that as well. So we're facing oblivion. All right. Over to our next presenters, and that's Davina Palat and Kua Swan. Kua can't join us, but this has been on we get regular questions about how to use the Living Histories digital platform. So Davina and Kua have created a film for us, and
they have. So I'm going to share this, and let me know if you can hear it okay. Hopefully you can. And then we'll be just taking questions afterwards. So I'll start playing, and
a library officer in the special collections.
Can you hear that at home?
Today we're going to go through some of the functionalities of our website and a bit of an in-depth look at how to
very soft and
search our catalogues and a few other interesting things.
Hi, I'm Davina Palat and I am Library Officer, and I'm here to support Kua in helping you navigate yourself around our websites. So let's get started. So I think, Kua, if we go to the Library Newcastle, University of Newcastle, Australia website there, and we click on that, and we can scroll down to the bottom of this website till we get to special collections. If we click on that picture there, we have a few options. So we have the University Archives, the Rare Book and Special Collections, and a bit further down, another link, Library Bookings and Appointments. And if we just if you would like just to send an inquiry through, you can just click on the inquiry link and that will send us an email for us to respond to you at a later date. So if we want to head to the University Archives, this will take us to various collections. Three of our main collections there, the Pender Archives, the records of the Anglican Diocese of Newcastle, and the Living Histories website as well. So if we go into Living Histories, and we go to the home button, and we can scroll down till we have search our collections. Here we can do a basic search.
This is where, you know, we can come to find some of the more requested items and some of the things that really stick out to a lot of people and we get a lot of inquiries about. So I think the biggest one we get is the Anglican Diocese of Newcastle, and this is where we can come in and find certain parts of this collection that we can help people find certain things to help them with their inquiry. So here we have births, marriages and burial registers. The finding aid is a really good resource to specifically hit what parish or what area you're looking for. We also have a few links to those sorts of things and our email address down the bottom, just in case there's something that isn't as easy and accessible. You can email us and we can start the conversation that way. But finding aids are scattered all through our websites, and this is where you can find specific parts of the collection that may be in your area and of interest, and there's also a zoom in button that, you know, can make it bigger for you if you need that sort of thing.
And maybe just another tip. one way of searching a registry that's actually that's already on a transcript or on a PDF, we can download it and then do a find from that. So maybe, Kua, do you want to show them if we go down to the download button?
Yep.
And we click on that, and we click on the PDF icon there and open that for download. Comes at the bottom, we click on there, click the PDF, and we can do a Control F on your keyboard, and a little window will pop up and we can search. So if we wanted to find the name of Smith, for example, it will show that we've got 10 Smiths. So we can scroll till we come to the first Smith, and there we have the Smiths will get highlighted. So that's a kind of a nice tip that you can find if you see any PDFs in any of the website there. You can download them and do a find. Over to you.
I'm having trouble getting back out of this.
Oh, so
PDF now.
Yeah, to press the little X.
Yeah, it's just my toolbar is again.
Oh no, that's right.
But that's a good way to search any of our finding aids and really try to make anything as easy as it can be for your end before you come to us with a question. We are open to doing these sorts of things for you, but at the same time, it helps us to have a bit of context. So in your inquiry, maybe it's just a matter of highlighting the link and sending it through. If there is ever the scenario where there is something on our website that you might be more inclined to add a bit of a story to what images you have, or what you may hold as knowledge towards these sorts of things. We also have our little recollection button here, and when you click on this button, it can create a link to our website where you can put in your contact information, email address, and create an account. And this is also a really good place to have your say in whatever it may be on our site. We also have some copyright information on the side here. For use of some of the content, we ask that people contact us and ask for permission and ask for some parameters around how you reference the Special Collections team or the website for where you found your images. If it's being used in a presentation, this is pretty much academics or people that are doing some sort of presentation on what particular subject they've come across in our websites. And that's just as simple as coming to one of the 3 links and clicking on it, and that'll send an email to us at archives@newcastle.edu. You can put in whatever the inquiry is, or if it's a copyright issue or whatever it may be, and that'll come directly to me and Davina, and we can pass that on to the right team member that can help with that inquiry. Anything I'm missing, Davina?
No, that looks good.
We showed how to download. We showed how to recollect.
Yeah, and you can also use a little under the toolbar there with the download button, you've got the email address. The email icon. You can do the same thing there if you need to contact us. And I think the little right pen tool as well. There it is. That's what I was looking for before.
Do you want to explain this one to me a little bit?
This is so any description that you think that you'd like to change, for example, Allen family collection that had 1956 and you know it was 1954 and potentially have some information back up that will confirm that. Like recently I had someone who sent through the date of a debutante ball in Newcastle City Council in 1955, but it was actually a New Year's Eve party and he actually sent through the clip, newspaper clipping. So you could add that to that description and send it through to us and we can verify that and we can add it to our descriptions.
And just with these add a map geotags, you don't have to add a map. You can actually just tag the spot on the map where this building may have been or this New Year's Eve party. And that's a really good description on how some of the parts of this website work. There is also our other website, our blog post, Hunter Living Histories at Newcastle and at the University of Newcastle. And this is another place where you can also find so many more useful links back to our website and back to our catalogues just through the big orange magnifying glass. And this is a good place to go and see certain things that may be hard to navigate, but makes everything a little bit easier. So in this place, we can search for a collection and name, whatever it may be, and this can give us a link to our websites or our collections and anything else on Google as well that may be relevant to the particular subject that you're looking for, just through that search icon there.
Yeah, so maybe we can do a search with and show the parameters, how to use those with the dates and maybe isolate a few searches because sometimes that can get a bit tricky. So we did a share, say we did shipwrecks. And we click on just to enter. So we can come up with various shipwrecks. Now we can search, this search will take us to 14 pages. But if we want to potentially drill down further, we can just do shipwreck Stockton. If that was what we were wanting to have a look at, that reduces it to 9. Maybe we were after the, we could put the name, but if we didn't know the name of the ship that we were looking for, but we knew roughly the date, we could change it to 1904, for example, if we knew. And that would bring up, and when you put your cursor over the images, you'll be able to see the drop down the details more without actually having to go into each one of them. So this was 1988. So we were after the Adolphi 1904. So then we find this one here. That's an earlier one, but there we have that image there. If we wanted to, it also shows us on the sides here of the different. So in this, what we're looking at is there's 156 photos. So if it's a photo that we're after, then we can click straight onto the photo, and that would eliminate any letters or drawings or anything that wasn't related to a photograph. If it was publications we're after, we could just click on the publications and that would bring up the 36 publications that were up. So we can use these filters.
I think it's time to find the publication.
The internet is taking forever.
Yeah. So now we've got all the publications. Highlighting this preview one, for example, is showing us that in our search parameter, it's got Stockton. So it may be not exactly what you're after, but it will possibly talk about, well, it's talking something completely irrelevant to the shipwrecks. In this case, double murders. So, yeah, so we can move over to things that are not relevant. But if it was the photographs we're after, we would go straight back to that. In this case, there's the finding aids. We can go straight to the finding aids. And this can also, these finding aids, so in this one, for example, highlighting this preview, it will show that shipwrecks, the word shipwrecks will be in this finding aid. And we can look at, this might be something more information of the shipwrecks that you might be useful. And this one, the same. Same thing. There's also 2 audios as well, if that was helpful. You can also, if we're after a specific photo, or you're just wanting photographs of shipwrecks in general, you can highlight these. Say you wanted just old photographs of the ships. You can just go through and highlight these photos for yourself. Go back up to the screen and download. It will come up with a window. You just want the digital items. You can click on that and then just download. And this would send you an email with the links of all those images that you've actually checked. So it's a handy feature as well. If you're doing your own sort of research, you can add favorites as well. Anything else, Kua, that I've missed?
No, I don't think so. I think that was pretty much everything.
And of course, if you want to start a new search, you can remove all filters and start again. But the dates are handy, and and isolate. Otherwise, the word, if it's a long title, if you know the title of the image, that will zero you in. But if not, it will potentially bring up many other images with those specific words that won't have any relevance for you. So the filters are a handy feature.
All right. Well, I think that is really good. If there's any more information that anybody needs, feel free to get in contact with us through some of the ways we showed today, or just pop in an email to archives@newcastle.edu.au and we'll be happy to help. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Davina.
Okay, thank you, Davina and Kua. So if you have any questions, I hope that's been helpful. I hope you've learned something else there, like I just did. So if you have any burning questions, just let us know, but we'll just keep rolling on. So next, we're going to go into some short takes, and these are just quick updates on things. So I'd like to invite Lindsay Fratis, who's the Manager of Client Services, to just talk about community membership. If Lindsay's out there.
I thought she zoomed in. She hasn't joined yet, so we
okay.
might jump to the next.
All right then.
Yeah, sorry about
Okay,
that.
next, Margaret Senior exhibition with Katie.
Yes, hello. I'll just share my screen because I have a few.
Just going to change that clock.
Just a moment. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Oh, sorry. Just a moment. And then
That's good,
there we
Katie.
go. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the Margaret Senior exhibition, which we opened here on the 8th of March in the level 2 gallery space here at the Moody Library. So just a little bit about Margaret Senior. She was born in London in 1917 and immigrated to Australia to the coast of New South Wales in 1939. And from this time, she became a very celebrated plant and wildlife illustrator and children's book illustrator. On display in the exhibition, you'll see her iconic posters that she created for the New South Wales Parks and Wildlife Service, which many people remember growing up with. These were distributed widely to most primary schools across New South Wales to help teach kids about Australia's unique biodiversity. The other thing she did was illustrate children's books, many of which were also about educating children and young readers about environmental issues and promoting an appreciation for the environment. For example, the one that's on your screen now is Bushhaven Animals, which Margaret Senior both wrote and illustrated. And it's a story about 3 children exploring and learning about Australian habitats and encountering animals who lived in these habitats. Another one she illustrated was Curry Curry the Kookaburra, which is a fable about how the kookaburra, which is not endemic to New South Wales, ended up here because of human interference. She also worked closely with the Department of Primary Industries to illustrate the diseases of plants. These were originally produced in 1964, but they're still in use in publications produced by the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries today. So due to these kinds of activities, in 1988, Margaret was awarded the Medal of the Order of Australia for her services to wildlife conservation. She also contributed financially to this university by way of a yearly scholarship for those studying plant and wildlife illustration, which began here in the 1990s. This then became natural history illustration from the early 2000s. Margaret passed away in 1995, but she left a bequest so that the scholarship can continue to be given to students in natural history, in the Natural History Illustration program up until that ended last year. We hold a large collection of her works. These include sketches and wildlife studies and lead-up work for her books and her posters. We have a few folders out for you to browse today, which Davina kindly put out for us. And yeah, so the exhibition features a selection of her original finished artworks and publications with a focus on the Parks and Wildlife posters. And these are contextualized alongside her very beautiful original artworks, which they were developed from The exhibition will close on the 16th of June. So I hope you have a chance to come and see it. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much, Katie.
Thank you.
That's great. Yes, and the exhibition features some lovely bird song and a real cricket. So that chimes in with the birds every so often. So you're very welcome to see it online through the Living Histories site, or people here can actually see the physical books. So thank you very much, Katie. All right, over to you now, Judy Lindsay, on the exhibition of Charles Martin's artworks.
Well, many of you would know Charles, who died earlier this year. There've been a collection of his paintings, 60 of them, watercolours, that he selected before he died, which will be exhibited here at the University Gallery on the 27th, 28th, 29th and 30th of April. The profits, the important part is, of course, is the profits of this selection of paintings will go to the Vera Deakin Foundation, and which we're very pleased about. And Charles was very definite that that should happen. And it's the intent of the funds that are raised are to preserve and enhance the work that Charles did on the 1825 digital model of Newcastle. So hopefully that exhibition will raise a lot of money. And of course, you are all invited. And if Johnny's happy about it, we would like to issue an invite to the opening, if that's possible.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's I think it's very exciting that we've been able to put it together. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. We can see the artworks here on this sheet that you've
Yeah, so I've got some documents here.
And you can't see, but they're very beautiful.
Yeah,
works.
it's a catalogue, yes, and there's just some words here on a separate thing, which I'll hand out to the people here in this room, but Anne might be able to pass some on to anyone else that's interested. So, yeah.
No worries. Well, thank you very much. Yep.
Piggyback on.
Yes, you may piggyback, Leslie Gent,
from
the Friends of the University.
Of Charles' work, the Friends of the University, we have a book sale in coordination with it, as well as an art sale, 28th, 29th and 30th. All our money goes to scholarships, but they're being run together. The opening, we haven't settled on what day the opening is actually going to be, whether it's going to be the Thursday or the Friday. And what we have, there's free parking on the weekend for anyone who's listening. So that's a big plus for the Saturday and Sunday. What we have, as well as books for sale, we have some rare books for people who want to look at the beautiful leather tooling and that type of thing, so that people who don't want to buy can still come along. We have the Matthew Flinders, the 2 big volumes, and the box containing, not the originals, of course, the facsimile of the box containing all his charts. In actual fact, that was sold, one of the original prints was sold recently for thousands of dollars. But we've got that. That's something people might like to look at. They normally wouldn't see unless they went to a city library. I haven't got it here, have you?
What, Matthew Flinders, yes.
The one with the box with all the charts in it.
I think so. That's the 3rd volume.
Anyway, the art that we're doing, selling, has all been donated. We've never done this before, but the art was all donated. And Gillian has very, very kindly allowed us to. We have the one half, and Charles. And also with Charles's exhibition, I've asked Joni if we can run his video. You know, that one you made up of all
on YouTube, so yes.
So we'll run that on and off during the weekend. That just should be nice, because a lot of people haven't seen it. And I think it's an excellent thing. Anyway, 28th, 29th and 30th.
Seems like it will be the month of Charles.
28th, 29th, 30th. Two sites in the art gallery. You wouldn't think it was big enough to hold it, but anyway, we're starting to hang
on the 20th. I think it is the 20th. So, and anyone is welcome to come and have a look and buy.
Leslie, can you just remind us the dates of the book fair?
28th, 29th, 30th.
Of
April this month. Yeah, not long to go.
the book fair. The book fair.
Yeah, our book fair. Yeah, the mini book fair. Then we have a big book fair in September.
Okay.
This is just combining with Charles's
Oh,
work.
I see. So it's not the big book fair.
This is a mini book
The
fair.
mini book
The
fair.
big
okay.
one's in September.
Okay.
Call it a mini book fair.
That's good. Yeah, I don't want to confuse people.
Does everyone got it out there in Zoom land? There's a mini book fair and then there's a gigantic book fair.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Leslie and Judy, for that. Okay. So we have Lindsay,
Hello.
who we introduced before as Manager of Client Services,
Yep,
to talk on community membership.
Yes.
All of those that you want to join.
Thank you for inviting me along to just give a quick update on some changes that we've made to our membership. So particularly our community membership, we have made the community membership free. So we used to charge for it and now membership is free for the library. And we have also removed any fines that we used to charge for overdue. So instead of fines now, what we do is we suspend borrowing privileges. So if something is late and doesn't come back, then we no longer fine anyone for that. We suspend borrowing privileges until the items come back. And community members can borrow 50 items from the library for a period of 2 weeks, and each of those items can then be renewed 5 times. So if no one else wants that item, if it hasn't been recalled, then you borrow it for the initial 2 weeks and then you can renew it 5 additional times. Yeah, and the renewals happen automatically. You don't have to do anything. So that's kind of the good news, no charges. Yeah, and we're encouraging people to sign up and join.
Well, thank you very much. Any questions for Lindsay?
Not a question. I think it's really good news.
That's good news.
Really
All right.
good
Any
news.
round of applause for Leslie? Self-renewing book, that's just fantastic. The invention of the self-renewing book.
I know,
I
it's
love
great,
that.
isn't it? If there are any questions and afterwards.
Yeah.
Things I can send. Yeah.
All
Send
right.
them on to you.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank
Lindsay.
you. Nice to see you all.
Thank you very much, Leslie.
Thank you.
And just a question with regards to the venue of the mini book fair, that's the University Gallery.
Yeah.
So that's the gallery on campus.
Calais.
Calais, yeah.
But don't forget about the free parking.
Okay, so now introduced Tully Bundy Hollis, who is the history officer at Singleton Public Library. I'm going to put you in the middle of it, Lynn. If you want to, Tully, if you want to give us an update of what's happening at Singleton Public Library, you're quite welcome to.
Hi, yes, very on the spot. I just started, so I'm still kind of working things out, but we have a documentary launch coming up, which was the work of Maitland and Beyond Family History, Newcastle Family History and Singleton Family History all together. They compiled some of their research, got actors to come and do reenactments of chores that the women were doing, and that was done at Tokal Homestead in Patterson. And yeah, we're launching that during the Heritage Festival, so that's very exciting. And we also have an artist in residence that's coming to the library. She has created some amazing local history resources as well as art, so she'll put them out on display and speak to people when they come in about them. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So keep us in mind, Tully, if you go on any news that's happening up the region, please let us know.
Yeah.
Because we don't always have reps zooming in, but it's always nice to know what they're up to.
So where is the library?
Where is the Singleton Library?
In town, right near the council chambers. So it's at 10 Queen Street.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
All right. We've also had a note from practicing visual artist Stuart Smith, who we met with, and this might interest the heritage architects, but Stuart's very interested in, I'll just read his bit to us, and he wanted to share it with you because he's doing a study of the use of facades in retaining heritage structures in town. So I'm a practicing visual artist with an MFA in painting and a trained visual arts teacher. I am currently studying for a diploma of photography and digital imaging at Hunt Street, TAFE. I would like to understand the discussion framework surrounding redevelopment sites and the changing face of Newcastle's built environment. So facade retention or frontage deemed to have heritage significance, such as Dairy Farmers Corner, the old David Jones building and Wolf Street area. So if there's anyone that would like to speak with Stuart about this, I mean, he's also interested in impressions. So he came and spoke with us a while back. I just gave him an honest rendering that, sometimes it works with the Dairy Farmers Corner. I liked the retention of the facade there, but other times it's a bit of a cop-out. Most times, to me, it seems like a bit of a cop-out. So retaining the facade, unless you're going to do something more with the structure, is usually a bit of a disappointment. So that's open for discussion. He's very interested in engaging why we do that here, all right? So he's not from here, but he's interested in how we deal with the heritage. So very interested in talking to heritage architects, National Trust people, anyone interested in the built environment. So think about that. And if you want us to put him in contact with you, we're very happy to. There's some people that we did put names forward before,
just
with Mark,
National Trust.
Mark, we also put in John Carr,
Amanda Hine,
and
Mark Mitricus.
Heritage engineers would be interested in that too,
Okay.
because their debate is that, like you just said, that the facade is preserved, but what's going on behind it?
Well, I don't know why they bother sometimes.
Yes,
if you're not
I know.
going to do it justice,
Particularly
why
if
just
it's all
say?
engineering works.
Yes,
machinery
I
and
know
that.
that there's a difficult story to it, and we got into the detail of who pays for it, and the fact that all the burden falls on the developer. Where it is, if it's a shared heritage, then we're all got to play a bit. So it's it's what we do with this stuff is a bit of a struggle, but is interesting because he's got fresh eyes and fresh approaches to this. So he's sort of viewing us from afar, and so it's very interesting to get that sort of perspective. All right, so any more news or updates?
Just a few updates on work integrated learning students and new interns that we have in special collections. So Isabel Whittle was successful in the Vera Deakin Regional History internship that runs all year, and she's going to be supervised by Dr. Morgan Burgess, one of our colleagues, and we'll be working on various projects across the year. For 6 months, we have Zach Allen. He's a creative industry student, and he's the Virtual Technologies Activation Project intern. So he'll be using our Matterport to 3D scan some of the exhibitions and the exhibition that's currently on at the lockup, and just build some skills in 3D scanning, and for us having the creation of a 3D file, doing some more scanning and updating like our VR projects and the equipment that we purchased last year. And we've got 2 work integrated learning students, Tamara Asmus, who I think Tamara was going to zoom in. She's a 3rd year student finishing her BA and doing a double major in English, writing, politics and international relations. So she's going to be working with Amir and the team in progressing the Hannon project and scan around 100 more of the negatives from that collection. We've also got Finn Stevenson from the School of Information and Physical Sciences, Computing and Information Science. He's doing a work integrated learning project over the whole year as well. Really interested in what we have digitised, looking at how he can sort of work on a small project to either sort of streamline it or make certain parts of our collection easier to locate and find and search. So we've left it pretty much open to him to create a project. So it'll be exciting to see what he comes up with at the end of the year. And these students will be sort of presenting at the Hunter Living History Showcase over the next few months. Got several new volunteers, and most of those are going to be also working on the Hannon Photographic Archive, which we're going to have a Hunter Living History Showcase dedicated just to that project, and invite some of the photographers and creators and the material so we can build up more of the story and history behind it. Amir may be available. I know he's sort of busy vigilating in the reading room, but Amir, if there's anything else you want to add, just chime in. No, you can't talk. That's all good.
That's all right. Well, July 3rd is going to be the special showcase on the Hannon Photographic Archive. So there's about an estimated 1 million images there. I miscalculated. I thought it was 100,000. when I had a look again, I thought, no, there's about 1 million now. And so it's going to take it's going to take generations to do, basically. So
it's a collection that's held by the university.
Yes, that's just one. And so we've just started really after, it's been here since 2014, but we've managed to contact the owners, the original owners, the son of the original owner, and also a number of the photographers. So they'll be coming in as a panel discussion, and we'll also have members of the team bringing you up to scratch with the work that goes behind something like this. So yeah, dealing with, this is just one archive, mind you, but it, along with the MBN archive, which is the audio-visual equivalent, will give you basically a huge repository of audio-visual and visual imagery of the Hunter region from about the 1950s to the present day. So it's massive, but behind the scenes, just want you to understand what sort of goes on, especially from the conservation point of view of preparing the things, to the work that Tamara is going to be doing, which is digitising, but also investigating some of these images. And some of them are a surprise. You know, they showed us the first 100 the other day, and it was a real joy just to look through them, because you have this sort of sense of discovery that you're looking at some images that looks like a pile of dirt with a few trees and a building in the distance. Something's triggering you. And the tree ends up being the Cooksey pine, on the Still River side, and the big pile of dirt is the building of the industrial highway. So it's stuff like that that grabs you. And then there's a lot of other things that are in the images that we really need a community sort of partnership with what we do in terms of identifying them. But it really is, will go on for generations because there's so many images, and these photographers are going to be very good at helping us understand what's going on as well. For future generations that will be working on it. So, all right. So, what else have we got?
Now, the Dorothy Ewart Centenary event.
Yep.
So, Marilla North emailed this through this morning for anyone that's interested in attending an event at Norman Lindsay Gallery in Springwood on the 21st of May at 3 p.m. to commemorate Dorothy Ewart Centenary event. That is being put together by her son and a group of people. So I know there's an online link. If anyone's interested, maybe email me and I can just forward it on to Marilla.
We'll send it through the meeting.
Yeah, yeah.
And also the Loud Sky exhibition.
Yeah, so the Loud Sky exhibition was launched as part of the Newcastle Writers Festival on Friday night. And I think it probably goes for about 3 weeks. And it's a collaboration of artists that have worked with survivors of child sexual abuse. It was a very moving launch. They had the commissioner who was involved in the Royal Commission. He spoke about, just reflected on the outcomes. It was a real mixed group there on Friday night. But yeah, some really wonderful works, including by an artist that used to be one of our volunteers here, Damien Lanane. So Damien has gone on. He's doing his PhD at the moment, but yeah, we're sort of part of being able to collaborate with some survivors. And he's, yeah, quite a skillful artist and sketcher. So he taught himself to sketch and wrote a book while he was in jail a couple of years ago. So he's a real high achiever. He's done a lot of things, and yeah, really worth having a look at that exhibition.
Yes, I went yesterday and saw it.
Yeah,
Very moving.
it is very moving. Yeah. Yes, so the researcher Kath Phillips and her research assistant worked with us in special collections in collating some footage, and yeah, they've created like a timeline in one of the rooms to sort of describe the events of the Royal Commission and Newcastle being a hotspot and really being a pivot point in New South Wales of a lot of the abuse that happened. But it's just, I think, a good example of artists working with survivors and how art can heal. And yeah, that's basically what Damien was talking about, his experience and how he's found it really helpful. His PhD is actually exploring inmates in jail, and a lot of inmates have been victims of child sexual abuse, that once they're incarcerated, they're not entitled to mental health counselling or Medicare. So the importance of art is probably even more so for, you know, a lot of those inmates.
Thank you very much. And the community heritage grants are now open. We'll be sending out a link.
Yeah, I think I popped in a link in the last email. So they're good for like history groups, museums that are after those specific grants.
Yeah. So if there are any updates that people have that they want to share, now's the time to do it. We've got a few more minutes left.
Yeah, you can either pop them in the chat or Tali, I don't know if you've got a link to the event you were talking about. If you have, you might want to just pop it in the chat if there's the launch of that documentary.
We're just finishing up that, so probably this week I will have those things. So maybe next, it's not until May, so maybe next time.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are any questions or comments, let us know. Or else, all I have is left to say is just thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, and thank you to all our presenters. And we bid you a farewell until next month for our, what are we now, April? May.
May Day.
Oh, it'd be May Day. So look, that's going to be a very interesting showcase. We've got a focus on obviously May Day, but also the role of Newcastle Trades Hall and the push to build the University of Newcastle, and also Aboriginal land rights and empowerment that was spearheaded by the Newcastle Trades Hall. So we'll be having Rod Noble, who'll be coming in to speak on that, and also Professor Kate Senior, and also Dr. Ray Kelly. So it should prove to be a very interesting May Day to spend. So we look forward to your presence next month, and bid you all a farewell. Safe travels.